So your child's been prescribed MiraLAX for their constipation and you're told that it was safe. But a few weeks go by and you're noticing some weird stuff. They're having more tantrums, they're having all sorts of meltdowns or behavioral changes, they're acting anxious, and you're wondering, are these things connected? Why did nobody warn you that it might happen? What you might not know is that the FDA hasn't approved MiraLAX for use in kids under 17 years old. And you also might not know that they've received numerous reports of side effects, specifically neuropsychiatric side effects, stuff like anxiety, aggression, paranoia, even OCD type of behaviors. These are really, really common when someone is taking MiraLAX. And that's super concerning for us as parents, right? If that's you, if you have a kid who deals with constipation, if you've maybe tried MiraLAX or other sort of supports with or without success, but you want to get to the root cause, please tune into this video. That's what we want to do. I want to explain what's really going on with constipation, explain some of the neuroscience behind the scenes and how it's not just a digestive issue, and I want to give you some real solutions to get to that root cause instead of just treating the symptoms. Because listen, constipation is not a deficiency of MiraLAX, right? That's not fixing anything. It can sometimes make a difference on the symptoms. It can sometimes give temporary relief, but there's a whole bunch of side effects that we're concerned with, and we really want to get to that deeper why. So let's get into it. And this is something that has been so common in some of our conversations here at Thrive recently, because we've had so many kids noticing major bowel movement changes early on in care. They maybe have some long-term sensory or spectrum type of challenges and goals, but they're noticing within that first couple of visits, that first couple of weeks, their kid is really catching up on bowel movements, right? Because that goes hand in hand with so many other struggles with kids is constipation. And one of the biggest side effects of healing is pooping, right? That's a great thing. So regardless of whether that's the goal for somebody coming in or that's just another struggle that they're dealing with a laundry list of others, we have been seeing some major change. And I actually have some scans that I want to show you, some of the nervous system healing that's taking place with one of our little boys that's been on daily MiraLAX for a while. And the mom's just saying over just the first month of his care plan, there's been multiple times where he's gone 3 days, 4 days without taking it at all because he's starting to go on his own and he is crushing it. So let's get to that, but let's understand what's going on. How does MiraLAX work? It works through this process called osmosis, where it's pulling water into the intestines, and that's going to then soften the stools so it's easier to pass. And that's, yes, a good thing if the goal is only addressing the poop, but it's not actually fixing why it's taking place, and it's kind of overriding the system. Because what really should be happening is our nervous system, which is the operating system or the air traffic control center for your whole body. That's what regulates gut health. That's what regulates motility. And so when we're getting backed up, there's something else at play. There's some other deeper why. It's not just we should override the system. Here's a concept I want you to latch onto and remember. If we are forcing bowel movements, if we're taking laxatives when there's dysregulation internally, it's like you're slamming the gas pedal, but the parking brake is locked on. It is going to create major issues and major dysregulation within that kid because you're forcing a function that the body hasn't really regulated through. Plus, that is where you're going to end up with a lot of the side effects, right? These side effects are super common from a GI perspective. They're bloating, they're gassy, there's cramping, the belly is just really, really uncomfortable. And that is what then can lead to some of the neuropsychiatric ones. If your gut is constantly being wrecked, your mood's not going to be real great. You're going to be really irritable. You're going to have a short leash. You're going to have those meltdowns and those tantrums. We heal the gut, and the mood is going to follow as well. And that's one of the things that we've heard with some of those patients that I just mentioned, that the kids have been doing way better with bowel movements. It's turned into a better mood and happier kids, and they're just thriving in general. One thing that is also connected to this that we see with a ton of the different kids that will go through their case history is the later on in life constipation issues, right? When it's showing up in the 3, the 5, the 7-year-old, those are a lot of times connected to previous antibiotic usage or other signs of gut dysregulation, because we can see so many signs that point towards early and frequent use of antibiotics in long-term health challenges. Stuff like asthma, allergies, gut issues, constipation. When the kid has been exposed to multiple rounds of antibiotics within that first 2 years of life, the incidence or the rate of those things taking place, those chronic either inflammatory or neuroimmune challenges, those go way up because we've messed with that foundation, we've messed with the gut health. So that's why we don't want to just override the system, right? You don't want to slam the gas pedal down when the parking brake is locked on, because it's going to create all sorts of dysregulation. So what's actually taking place? Why are we stuck? The constipation often started before you realized, before you even noticed. We see with so many of the kids that are dealing with this challenge that there's a deeper case history of stress. We call it the perfect storm. It's the story of why so many kids are struggling with this long-term chronic, either immune or gut or neurological regulation sort of challenges. And a lot of times it starts in pregnancy, right? We see fertility case issues that are at the root of this, where maybe mom or the family was dealing with some sort of extra stress in that pregnancy journey. And so that kid's foundational operating system gets locked into fight or flight. The only thing they know is stress or survival mode. That gets majorly amplified when there's birth trauma or birth intervention, because now we are injuring and damaging some of those really sensitive and really delicate parts of their nervous system. Whether that's a prolonged labor, or there's a lot of pushing, or there was ending up with some forceps or vacuum extraction or C-section that traction that delicate upper cervical brainstem and upper neck area. Those are things that we see so connected to these long-term baby struggles, and then all the way through childhood and even adulthood, guys. Those are so connected to that start to life, because it sets the foundation and it sets the baseline operating system for that kid. So we see those early things that can really predispose a kid to be dealing with these challenges. And then if you throw on environmental toxins and exposures to stuff that they shouldn't be experiencing, plus antibiotic use, like we talked about, those things in a system that's already wrecked, that's where catastrophe hits. And that's where, this fuse box analogy, I think this really explains this. So let me kind of walk you through what this looks like. This fuse box is our framework for thinking about how can we get to the cause, that word up top here. So much of healthcare is focused on this right-hand column. That's a list of different symptoms. That's the things that you want to see as a parent. And I get that, and I want that too. But the symptoms here, whether it's constipation and GI issues on the bottom, or sleep and anxiety and emotional and sensory challenges up top, those symptoms are only going to get resolved by getting to the why, by getting to a deeper cause. And that's where your nervous system is key, because your nervous system is the foundation of everything else. Healthcare lives here. They're managing and masking symptoms and treating the secondary downstream issues instead of going backwards to the why. That's what we want to get to. So we want to get to that foundational neurological regulation. And that's where the scans that we do are so key. Let me grab one of those here, because I want to show you this one. It's a great constipation and GI issue example. So this kiddo, just kind of referenced some of the lower challenges are oftentimes the ones that are related to more of the constipation or belly or GI issues. When we're looking at just scanning 101, we see up top here, this kid had a lot of dysregulation, a lot of significant imbalance in some of those lower GI centers. This was the very first scan update. When we got to that first progress scan where he'd been going to the bathroom more regularly, having a better mood, not needing MiraLAX anywhere near as often, that area is starting to change. That area is starting to heal and to clear. And there's a whole bunch more showing up and a whole bunch more that's a part of his journey that we got to keep working through. But we're in those early phases. And that is a huge sign of healing, is when we see some of those bowel movement, sleep, those basic foundational functions start to come back online. We know we're on the right path, and we just need time. We just need that consistency and that momentum to keep up. So that's what I would encourage you, is to avoid just managing symptoms and get to the cause. Get to that why. When we have that perfect storm sequence of factors, we end up with a kid stuck in fight or flight. You end up with a system who's just stuck in overdrive, the sympathetic dominant. They don't have any brake pedal. They don't have any calming and wellness side of their nervous system. And so it's going to show up as gut and immune and just sensory regulation issues all the time. So we got to get to the why, right? That's the message here. Constipation is not a deficiency of MiraLAX, like I already said. We need to address those deeper causes. So final thoughts, parents. Let's not just look at the digestive system when we're dealing with constipation. Let's look at the nervous system. Let's look at the regulating system that controls everything else. Because if you miss that, you're only going to get temporary relief. You're only going to get maybe a little bit of improvements without ever addressing the cause. And then you're dealing with those long-term side effects, right? We don't want to mess with those for our kids. We want to get to something that actually fixes the why. Healing has to take place in the right order. You fix that foundation first, and then everything else can heal, everything else can change, and your kid can thrive.